My name is Ivis Garcia, and I'm associate professor in landscape architecture and urban planning at Texas A&M University. Floodings are going to keep happening, and going to keep happening over and over again. So how can we improve that through those different policies? Either it's like being providing the insurance, the mitigation on the community level, as well as like how to offer relocation programs that are on a voluntary basis. Floods affect people differently, many times based on income. Low income households and higher income households, as you might expect, are affected in very different ways. When we think about flooding, we tend to think about just a lot of the things that were inside of the home, outside, like in the curb, or we think about that water line that is like going down now, but it shows just like how bad a flood was. And just we might think about maybe a neighbors going in a boat down the street. And we think about households in a way just like being equally affected, right? Because it's kind of like the pictures that we see on TV. Just households can be affected very differently, just based on several factors at the household level. One of the most important ones is like whether they have insurance or do not have insurance, because this will determine if they can repair their homes, if they can rebuild their homes, if they can relocate somewhere else. And of course, there's other factors like savings and so on. So lower income households have the ability to also get just federal insurance. However, a lot of like low-income households make the calculation that they cannot afford it, right? So they don't choose. About like 90% of the households are like low income. They just choose to not pay for the insurance because for them it's like too expensive. And on average it's about like $900 a year, and that might not sound like a lot, but for a lower income family, when you have to decide on like whether or not pay for the car insurance, or even your home insurance, right? You might choose that instead of like paying for the flood insurance, even though it's subsidized. It's just you cannot afford it. Many households live in places where they might experience recurring floods. And I can tell you about my research in Puerto Rico. So I worked in areas where there's like a lot of informal housing, and people developed near creeks, near waters of bodies, near also the ocean. And again, many of these households, they don't have like the ability to pay for the insurance, but they live in very vulnerable areas. And oftentimes they do not have to wait for like 100-year event like Hurricane Harvey or like Maria, and they might flood every year. And every year they have the experience of like having to move somewhere else with a family member while they're cleaning their homes or waiting for the water to come down. And as they do that, they are spending a lot of resources. And this is not only true in Puerto Rico, but I have seen this in Houston, Texas as well, in where people will have to like repair on their own with the savings that they have, many times of just like Social Security. A lot of the people that live in neighborhoods that flood also tend to be like families with younger kids, like older adults. So people that have like a hard time being able to have that extra money to be able to repair their homes. But in a way, they're stuck, right? Because they cannot, do not have the resources to be able to relocate somewhere else. So they just decide to take that burden on their own. The public should understand about flood risk and recovery, that it just happens differently depending on whether or not you have insurance. So having insurance is very important. I would say that the public, especially if they're like also policy makers, they should reconsider of like how can we make insurance more affordable for like low-income households, and how to make it so we are also limiting developments in places where it doesn't make sense to keep paying for the national like flood insurance program, and keep paying for some particular households to have again just like this subsidy over and over again. I think that land management is something that the public should consider, especially like cities and governments, just thinking about where development should be placed in the future, even before like any person moves in there. That's like very, very important. But a lot of communities are already flooded, and a lot of communities are already affected. So what can policymakers and the public can support? They can think about planning, and how people can come together and think about, first of all, like how to mitigate some of the potential risks in the future, more of the community level. That might include like canalization of like water bodies, of like building infrastructure, so people suffer less from that flooding, and then it becomes like less costly at the community level.